Hello and welcome to this close read with annotations of The Refusal by Franz Kafka. So I've got my close reading and annotation tools here. I've got a blue pen, pink highlighter, and purple pen. Feel free to use whatever colors you want, just making sure that you have a different color for each read. So I'll start with my purple for my first read, and then later I will do blue for my second read. Okay, so there are 6 different sections to this, so it'll be really easy later for summary sentences, but let's do our first read through. So this first part in italics is the back or author info. So I'm just going to label that. Follow along as I read. Born in the Jewish ghetto in Prague, Franz Kafka, 1883, died 1924, allegedly burned up to 90% of his own work during his lifetime. Luckily, a few important pieces survived, enough to shape his legacy as one of the most influential 20th century writers. His works depict bizarre and sinister events within a society under bureaucratic control, inspiring the term Kafkaesque. Written in 1920, The Refusal describes a ritual ceremony in a small town governed by a distant capital. In times of need, the town's residents appeal to the highest-ranking government official, the tax collector, for help. The themes of oppression and authoritarianism would have resonated strongly with readers who had just endured World War I and were on the brink of another global conflict. So I'm going to highlight the words oppression and authoritarianism as 2 of the major themes. Part 1, the story. Our little town is far from the frontier. It's so distant that perhaps no one here has ever traveled there. Desolate highlands and vast fertile plains lie between us and the frontier. Just imagining the journey is exhausting, and the idea of completing it is unimaginable. There are also large cities along the way, each much larger than ours. Even stacking 20 towns like ours wouldn't amount to one of these sprawling metropolises. If you avoid getting lost on the journey, you'll certainly lose yourself in the big cities, and avoiding them is impossible due to their size. Further than the frontier, if such distances can even be compared, is the capital. Though we occasionally hear news from the frontier wars, we civilians learn almost nothing about the capital. Only the government officials have connections, claiming they can receive news in as little as 3 months. It always surprises me how humbly we submit to the capital's orders. For centuries, no political change has come from the citizens here. With great rulers and fall in the capital, and even entire dynasties are deposed, nothing changes in our town. Okay, so setting is a small town. Okay, there seems to be that oppression is coming through. And this is reminding me, it's kind of giving me Hunger Games. Not just the mention of a capital, but this small town reminds me of the district. Okay, so we have the frontier outside of the small town, and then you have to go through the cities to get to the frontier, and then once you get through the frontier and the cities, then you are in the capital. So those are kind of the main parts of the land that we're in. Page 2. The capital itself was once destroyed, a new one built far away, and later the old capital was rebuilt, but none of it affected us. Our officials have stated their post. The highest officials come from the capital, the less ranking ones from other towns, and the lowest from among ourselves. This system has always suited us. So I'm going to highlight that because it's very accepting of the system. So accepting of how things are. Part 2, the tax collector. Our top official is the chief tax collector, who holds the rank of colonel. So that seems like, pretty important information, so I'm going to highlight that. The current colonel is an old man. I've known him since childhood. He advanced quickly in his career at first, but then stopped. For a town like ours, his rank is sufficient. Anything higher would just seem out of place. I remember sitting on the veranda of his house in the market square, leaning back with a pipe in his mouth. Above him, the imperial flag flutters from the roof, and laundry hangs to dry on the sides of the veranda, which is large enough for minor military drills. His grandchildren, dressed in silk, play around him, though they aren't allowed to mix with the market square children who are deemed unworthy. Yet the grandchildren are drawn to the square, peeking between the veranda posts and joining the quarrels from above. Okay, so they aren't allowed to mix with the market square children who are deemed unworthy, so there's some type of class system. Though the colonel commands the town, I don't believe he has ever presented official documentation granting him this authority. Wow, so there's just blind trust here. Perhaps he really is the chief tax collector, but does that position justify his rule over every department? For the citizens, his role feels more symbolic, as if we're saying, now that you've taken all we possess, take us too. That quote seems pretty significant. The colonel isn't a tyrant. This power has accumulated around him over time, and both he and we have accepted this tradition. Despite living among us without flaunting his rank, he is still different from the ordinary citizen. When delegations visit with him with request, he stands as if he is the boundary of the world itself. Behind him lies nothingness. You might think you hear whispers from beyond, but it's just an illusion, for the colonel represents the end of all things, at least for us. So now to the next section. A childhood memory.